I never told my son what I really kept inside the massive basement vault of our ancestral home. When he married a slick, fast-talking social climber who thought she could outsmart a retired old man, I made sure she would never find the key. But while I was sitting comfortably at home nursing a glass of scotch, my estate manager called me in a dead panic. "Sir, your daughter-in-law is here. She has a drill, and she brought 2 armed men." I did not panic. I had been waiting for this exact moment. And what I did next brought her entire fake world crashing down. If you are connecting with my story, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss my upcoming life stories. Tell me in the comments where you are watching this video from and what time it is there right now. It makes me really happy to know which corner of the country or the world is listening to me and what time of day it is for you. It was exactly 11:30 at night. The rain was coming down hard, beating violently against the thick glass windows of my home in the Boston suburbs. I am Arthur Sterling. I am 72 years old, and I spent my entire life building a commercial real estate empire from raw land, sweat, and concrete. People look at me now and see a quiet, retired widower. They see a man who tends to his library and drinks his evening scotch in peace. They do not see the man who survived 40 years in the cutthroat development industry. I had just poured myself a generous measure of that scotch, the good stuff I saved for special occasions. When my burner phone buzzed, it vibrated heavily against the mahogany desk. Very few people have that number. One of them is Marcus Thorne, a 65-year-old military veteran who has managed my properties with absolute loyalty for 2 decades. I picked it up. Marcus did not bother with greetings. His voice was a harsh, raspy whisper, barely rising above the sound of the torrential rain on his end. "Mr. Sterling, it is happening. Chloe is at the service entrance." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my drink, feeling the familiar burn of the alcohol slide down my throat. "Is she alone?" "Marcus." "No, sir," Marcus replied, his breath hitching slightly. "She has a heavy-duty drill, and she brought company. 2 large men. They are armed. I can see the glint of handguns tucked into their waistbands." "What are your orders? Do I engage? Do I trigger the silent alarms?" I stood up from my leather chair and walked over to my desk. I picked up my tablet, my fingers tapping the screen to bring up the hidden high-definition surveillance feed I had secretly installed weeks ago. The screen flickered to life, cutting through the darkness with crisp night vision. There she was, my daughter-in-law, Chloe Sterling, the self-proclaimed lifestyle influencer, the woman who wore dresses that cost more than my first car. Standing in the freezing rain of the service alley, gripping a heavy industrial drill, I watched the rain plaster her perfectly styled hair to her forehead. I saw the desperate, greedy twitch in her jaw. "No, Marcus," I said, my voice dead calm. "Do not engage. Do not call the police. I want you to pull all the perimeter guards back. Open the outer blind spots. Give her a clear path to the main basement door." Marcus hesitated for only a fraction of a second. He knew me too well to question my sanity. "Are you absolutely sure?" "Sir, those men with her look like serious trouble." "I am entirely sure," I replied, resting my hand on a framed photograph of my late wife. "Eleanor, let her drill the lock. Marcus, let her walk right in. Tonight, she digs her own grave, and I want to watch her jump inside." I hung up the phone and set it down. On the screen, Chloe was struggling with the heavy reinforced steel securing the outer basement entrance. She looked pathetic. A rat, trying to gnaw its way into a steel trap. She had no idea what was waiting for her inside that damp, forgotten vault. She thought she was about to secure her financial freedom. She thought she had outsmarted a clueless old boomer. As I watched her finally breach the first layer, a cold, hard knot of anger tightened in my chest to understand how we ended up here, with my son's wife committing a major felony in the dead of night. You have to go back exactly 3 months. You have to go back to the exact moment the seed of doubt was planted. The moment I realized a parasite had attached itself to my family. It was Julian and Chloe's 3rd wedding anniversary. Julian is my 34-year-old son. He is the light of my life. A brillant, trusting soul who runs his own architectural firm. When Eleanor passed away, I made a silent vow at her graveside that I would protect our son from everything. From heartbreak, from failure, and most importantly, from greedy women who prey on kindness. Julian had organized a celebratory dinner at a high-end seafood restaurant downtown. I arrived early wearing a simple but clean suit, happy just to see my son smile. Chloe arrived 20 minutes late, loudly complaining to the maître d'hôtel, flashing her expensive jewelry, and acting like she owned the entire restaurant. She always rubbed me the wrong way. She talked too fast, promised too much, and always seemed to be looking over your shoulder to see if someone more important had walked into the room. We were halfway through our lobster tails when the conversation took a very strange turn. Julian was talking about a new commercial client he had found, but Chloe was completely distracted. She kept tapping her manicured nail against her water glass, her eyes darting toward me. "So, Arthur," Chloe said casually, leaning back in her chair and swirling her wine. "I was looking through some old family archives the other day, researching some history for a blog post. I happened to see some documents mentioning a massive subterranean vault beneath the old ancestral estate." I stopped chewing. I placed my fork down very slowly. I did not react outwardly, but internally, every single alarm bell I possessed began to ring. I have never discussed my hidden assets with Chloe. I have never mentioned the basement vault to anyone, not even to Julian. It was a heavily fortified room sitting beneath a neglected wing of the property. There was absolutely no reason for a lifestyle blogger to be digging through my private holdings. "Is that so?" I asked, maintaining a perfectly neutral, slightly confused expression. "Just an old storage space. Nothing but dust and forgotten furniture." "Why do you ask?" Chloe smiled. It was a slick, practiced smile that did not reach her eyes. "Just curious. It seems like prime square footage if you clear the junk out. A massive footprint. You know, holding on to dead weight like that is bad energy. Arthur. Clutter. Liabilities. Have you ever thought about opening it up? I have some designers who would pay top dollar just to renovate the space." I looked at my son. Julian was blissfully unaware of the tension, sipping his champagne and smiling at his wife. He thought she was just being helpful. He thought she was the successful, wealthy influencer she claimed to be. But my gut, the instinct honed by decades of dealing with corrupt contractors and greedy developers, told me otherwise. Why would a woman who supposedly manages millions in brand deals care about an abandoned vault in my basement? Why was she digging into my private blueprints? And why, despite her expensive clothes, did her eyes look so desperately hungry? I picked up my napkin and wiped my mouth. I let a slow, harmless, grandfatherly smile spread across my face. The kind of smile that makes a predator think his prey is completely blind. "Well, Chloe," I said, keeping my voice light and slightly raspy. I am just a retired old man. Interior design and renovations are a bit over my head these days. I just let it sit there. It is not hurting anyone. I saw a brief, sharp flash of satisfaction in Chloe's eyes. She thought I was weak. She thought I was ignorant. She thought she had just found a gold mine guarded by a senile old fool. But as I sat there in the restaurant matching her fake smile with my own, I knew one thing for certain. My son was married to a fraud. I did not know what her angle was yet or how deep her lies went. But I was going to find out. I was going to tear her entire facade apart, piece by piece, until the ugly truth was exposed for Julian to see. I paid the bill that night without batting an eye. When the waiter brought the leather folder, Chloe did not even make the polite customary gesture of reaching for her purse. She simply leaned back, patted her stomach, and praised the quality of the caviar. I handed over my credit card with a warm smile, playing the role of the generous, satisfied father perfectly. But beneath the table, my hands were clenched into tight fists, my knuckles, permanently scarred from decades of pouring concrete, throbbed with a dull ache. The ride home was quiet. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets of Boston slick and reflective under the amber glow of the streetlights. Driving my old reliable sedan through the city, my mind drifted back to the early days. It is funny how people like Chloe look at me now. They see an old man in a tweed jacket and assume my life was as simple as my wardrobe. They have no idea what it took to build a real estate empire from absolute zero. When Eleanor and I first married, we had nothing but a rented apartment and a mountain of ambition. I spent 16 hours a day on construction sites. I breathed in the smell of curing cement, diesel fuel, and damp earth until it seeped into my very pores. I managed grueling projects, negotiated brutal contracts, and hauled raw materials until my back felt like it was breaking in two. I did it all for them. Eleanor would come down to the site at 7 in the evening, carrying a thermos of black coffee and 2 sandwiches wrapped in foil. We would sit on the tailgate of my old truck, covered in grime, and talk about the future we were building for Julian. I promised Eleanor on her deathbed that I would never let anyone take what we had built for our boy. I intended to keep that promise. People like Chloe despise the dirt. They recoil at the smell of sweat and labor. Yet they are the first to show up with their manicured hands extended, desperate to claim the money that the dirt produced. She thought I was just an old fool, hoarding useless subterranean spaces. She did not realize that in my line of work, you learn how to spot a piece of worthless rubble disguised as something shiny. I barely slept that night. I sat in my study, the only room in my house that still smells faintly of the old development days, and stared at the dark oak walls. Why did she ask about that specific vault? The holding structure that conceals it is buried under layers of architectural obfuscation. Someone would have to be actively hunting for my hidden assets to trace that room back to me. The answer came knocking on my front door the very next morning at exactly 9 o'clock. I was in the kitchen brewing a pot of dark roast coffee when the doorbell chimed. When I opened the door, I found Chloe standing on the porch. She was wearing a sharp tailored blazer holding an expensive leather briefcase. Julian was standing right beside her, holding her arm, looking down at her with a gaze so full of blind admiration, it made my stomach turn. "Good morning, Arthur," Chloe said, flashing that identical bright empty smile from the restaurant. "I hope we are not interrupting your morning routine." I wiped my hands on a dish towel and ushered them inside. "Not at all," I said, keeping my voice gentle and welcoming. "I was just making coffee. What brings you two out so early on a Saturday?" Julian kissed my cheek. Chloe was up half the night working. "Dad," he said, his voice brimming with pride. "She wanted to show you something important." I led them into the living room and offered them a seat. Chloe unzipped her briefcase with practiced efficiency. She pulled out a thick, glossy architectural portfolio bound in a professional folder and slid it across the coffee table toward me. It looked like the kind of presentation you give to a zoning board, not your retired father-in-law. On a Saturday morning. "Arthur, I know we briefly touched on this last night." Chloe began, leaning forward, resting her elbows on her knees to appear earnest and sincere. "But I could not stop thinking about your estate layout. I did some deep diving into the original county blueprints. I hope you do not mind. I just want to look out for the family." I picked up the folder. The first page showed a detailed schematic of my property with the basement vault outlined in bright red ink. Next to it was a breakdown of estimated renovation costs and projected value increases. "You are wasting space on a dead zone, Arthur," Chloe continued, her voice dropping into a tone of faux concern. "That vault is sitting beneath prime residential real estate, but the structure itself is a void. You are paying massive property taxes on an empty shell. As a lifestyle entrepreneur, it hurts me to see potential tied up like that. You are 72 years old. You should be enjoying your twilight years, not paying taxes on damp concrete." I flipped through the pages slowly, pretending to be overwhelmed by the schematics and the colorful charts. She had done her homework. I will give her that. But her math was entirely based on public architectural records. She had no idea what was actually going on behind those reinforced doors. "I have developers in my network right now," Chloe said, her eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that bordered on predatory. "They are looking for unique subterranean spaces in that exact zip code. I can broker a private renovation and sale. I can get that dead weight off your hands by the end of the month and put a massive liquid cash injection directly into your retirement account. You would not have to lift a finger. I will handle all the paperwork." I looked over at Julian. He squeezed her hand, nodding eagerly. "Dad, you have to admit, she is making total sense," he said softly. "You have worked so hard your entire life. You do not need the stress of managing unused spaces. Chloe is a design genius. She knows exactly how to handle these property upgrades. Let her help you." The rage flared up inside me again, hot and sharp. My brilliant, trusting son was sitting in my living room, actively helping a parasite try to drain my assets. She had completely brainwashed him. She had convinced him that she was our financial savior, a wealthy expert gracing us with her brilliant acumen. I wanted to grab her by the collar of her tailored blazer and throw her out onto the street. I wanted to demand exactly how much debt she was hiding behind those expensive clothes. Instead, I forced my shoulders to drop. I let out a long, heavy sigh, acting exactly like the tired, confused old man she needed me to be. "Well, Clue," I said, tapping my calloused finger against her glossy report. "This is an awful lot to take in. I am just not used to moving this fast. My accountant usually handles these property forms, and I am not too great with all this modern architectural jargon." Chloe smiled, a look of distinct triumph flashing across her face. "You do not have to understand all the jargon, Arthur. That is what I am here for. I can draw up the power of attorney documents this afternoon. Just a limited proxy so I can negotiate with the contractors on your behalf." I shook my head slowly, handing the folder back to her. "I appreciate the hard work, dear. I really do." But I am old-fashioned. I never sign anything the same day I read it. Leave the proposal with me. Let me read through it this week, with a magnifying glass and a cup of tea. We can talk about it again next weekend. Chloe's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Her jaw tightened. The impatience leaked out just enough for me to catch it. She needed that access fast. The urgency was palpable. Of course, Arthur. She recovered quickly, packing the documents away. Take your time. Just know that real estate markets fluctuate. These developers will not wait around forever. As I walked them to the door, I noticed Chloe paused by the entrance to the basement stairs. Her eyes darted down the dark hallway, landing squarely on the heavy reinforced door at the bottom. She stared at it for only 2 seconds. But 2 seconds was all I needed to confirm my suspicions. She was not just going to wait for me to sign her papers. She was looking for another way in. The hunt had officially begun, and I was more than ready to play the game. The morning sun crawled across the hardwood floors of my study, illuminating the heavy steel door of my vintage safe. I had been sitting in my leather armchair since dawn, staring at that combination dial, replaying the hungry look in Chloe's eyes from the night before. People like her cannot hide their greed. I took a slow sip of my black coffee. The house was completely silent, exactly the way Eleanor and I used to enjoy our Sunday mornings. I was just about to head out to the greenhouse to clear my head when the sharp chime of the front doorbell shattered the quiet. I glanced at the grandfather clock in the hallway. It was barely 8. Nobody drops by unannounced at this hour unless there is an emergency or they are selling something. I tightened my robe and walked to the foyer. Looking through the peephole, I saw my son Julian and his wife standing on the porch. Chloe looked like she had just stepped out of a fashion magazine, wearing a crisp, tailored outfit. Despite it being a Sunday morning, she was clutching a thick, leather-bound portfolio tightly against her chest. Julian looked tired, holding a cardboard tray of coffees, but he wore a strained smile. I unlocked the heavy door and pulled it open, pasting a look of pleasant surprise onto my face. Julian. Clue. What a surprise. I stepped aside to let them in. You should have called. I would have put some breakfast together. We brought pastries. Dad, Julian said, kissing my cheek as he walked past me into the kitchen. We know it is early, but Chloe was up practically all night working on something for you. She was so excited she could not even wait for Monday. I turned to look at Chloe. She stood in my foyer, radiating a false, energetic warmth. Good morning, Arthur, she said, extending her hand. I am sorry for the ambush, but when an opportunity strikes, you have to grab it. I shook her soft, manicured hand, feeling the stark contrast against my own calloused palms. I led her into the living room. Gesturing toward the sofa, Chloe sat down, placing her leather portfolio on the coffee table with a heavy thud. She unzipped it with practiced efficiency, pulling out a stack of high-gloss process, professionally bound documents. She spread them out across the glass surface. I sat across from her, resting my hands on my knees, playing the part of the confused, aging father perfectly. Arthur, I know we briefly touched on this at dinner last night. Chloe began, leaning forward to appear earnest and sincere. But I could not stop thinking about your holding properties. I did a deep dive into the county tax records. I hope you do not mind. I just want to look out for the family's future. I picked up the first folder. The cover page showed an aerial map of the estate with the vault outlined in bright red ink. Next to it was a detailed breakdown of estimated property taxes, maintenance liabilities, and projected losses. You are bleeding money on a dead asset. Arthur, Chloe continued, her voice dropping into a tone of deep artificial concern. That vault is sitting on prime residential land, but the structure itself is a massive liability. You are paying high property taxes on an empty shell, as an influencer. It physically hurts me to see potential tied up like that. You are 72 years old. You should be enjoying your twilight years traveling, relaxing, not paying taxes on damp concrete and old brick. I flipped through the pages slowly, pretending to be overwhelmed by the numbers and the colorful pie charts. She had certainly done her homework, but her math was entirely based on public tax records. She had absolutely no idea what was actually going on behind those reinforced doors. I have developers in my private network right now, Chloe said, her eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that bordered on predatory www. They are looking for subterranean footprints in that exact zip code. I can broker a private sale. I can get that dead weight off your hands by the end of the month and put a massive liquid cash injection directly into your retirement account. You would not have to lift a single finger. I will handle all the paperwork, the lawyers, the negotiations, everything. Julian walked into the living room, setting down a tray with the coffees and pastries. He sat next to Chloe, wrapping his arm around hers and looking at me with an expression that made my stomach churn. Dad, you have to admit she is making total sense, he said softly, though there was a distinct edge to his voice. You have worked so hard your entire life. You do not need the stress of managing abandoned spaces. You are not a young man anymore. Chloe is a financial genius. She knows exactly how to handle these corporate sales. Let her help you. The passive-aggressive sting of his words hit me hard. He was looking at me like I was a relic, an old pack rat clinging to trash. You need to let go of the past. Dad, he continued, his tone patronizing. Those old vaults, those dirty rooms, they belong to a different lifetime. You promised Mom you would take care of yourself. Let Chloe handle this. It is what she does best. The rage flared up inside me again, hot and sharp. My brilliant, trusting son was sitting in my living room, actively helping a parasite try to drain my assets. She had completely brainwashed him. She had convinced him that she was our financial savior, a wealthy expert gracing us with her brilliant business acumen. I wanted to grab her by the collar of her tailored blazer and throw her out onto the street. I wanted to demand exactly how much debt she was hiding behind those expensive clothes. But I forced my shoulders to drop. I let out a long, heavy sigh, acting exactly like the tired, confused old man she needed me to be. Well, Clue, this is an awful lot to take in, I said, tapping my finger against her glossy report. I am just not used to moving this fast. My accountant usually handles these tax forms, and I am not too great with all this modern financial jargon. Chloe smiled, a look of distinct triumph flashing across her face. You do not have to understand all the jargon, Arthur. That is what I am here for. I can draw up the limited proxy documents this afternoon. Just a signature so I can negotiate with the buyers on your behalf. I shook my head slowly, gathering the folders. I appreciate the hard work, dear. I really do. But I never sign anything the same day I read it. Leave the proposal with me. Let me read through it. Chloe's jaw tightened slightly, but she kept her fake smile plastered on. Of course. Arthur, take your time. Just remember, these buyers will not wait forever. The market is moving fast. I understand. I watched through the front window as Chloe guided Julian down the porch steps. She placed a hand on the small of his back, a gesture that probably looked like loving devotion to anyone else. But to me, it looked exactly like a handler steering her mark. They climbed into her least luxury SUV, a vehicle I now suspected she could not actually afford, and pulled out of the driveway. The sound of the engine faded down the quiet suburban street, leaving me alone with the heavy, stifling silence of the empty house. I stood there for a long time, feeling a cold, bitter wave of disrespect wash over me. It was not just the arrogance of her financial presentation, or the slick, practiced way she tried to manipulate me into signing away a property I had bled for. It was the sheer audacity of coming into my home, eating the pastries my son bought, and looking at me as if I were nothing more than a decaying obstacle standing between her and a payday. She looked at me the way a vulture looks at a dying animal. I walked slowly back into the living room and picked up the glossy financial portfolio she had left on the coffee table. I tossed it into the trash can without a second thought. I did not need to read her fabricated numbers. I already knew exactly what she was trying to do. I made my way down the hallway to my private study, the room Chloe had been eyeing just moments before. I closed the door behind me and walked over to the vintage steel safe bolted to the corner of the floor. It was a massive, heavy piece of iron, manufactured back in the 1950s. The combination dial was worn smooth from decades of use. I ran my calloused hand over the cold metal, feeling the familiar, reassuring weight of it. This safe was a symbol of everything Eleanor and I had built. When we started the development business, we could not afford a proper banking setup. We kept our first earnings completely in cash, locked inside a small metal lockbox hidden under our bed. As the business grew, so did the risks. I bought this safe after our first major contract, a massive commercial plaza job that took 2 years to complete. I promised Eleanor on the day we bolted it to the floor that I would always fill it with enough security to make sure Julian would never have to struggle the way we did. Eleanor was a fierce, perceptive woman. She could spot a liar from a mile away. If she were still here, she would have seen right through Chloe's expensive clothes and hollow charm on the very first day Julian brought her home for dinner. But Eleanor was gone, and the responsibility to protect our son fell entirely on my shoulders. I looked at the framed photograph of Eleanor sitting on my desk. Her warm, knowing eyes seemed to pierce right through the glass. I will not let her break him. Eleanor, I whispered into the quiet room. I will not let her take a single dime of what we built. But I knew I had to be smart. If I simply called Julian and told him that his wife was a scheming gold digger, he would defend her. Chloe had spent 3 years building a narrative, painting herself as the successful, caring partner. If I attacked her directly, I would become the villain. I would be the paranoid, controlling father trying to ruin his marriage. Chloe would use my accusations to drive a wedge between us, isolating Julian and making him even more dependent on her. I could not allow that to happen. I had to let Chloe think she was winning. I had to let her believe her manipulation was working, that the clueless old man was slowly taking the bait. I needed to feed her greed until she became reckless enough to expose her true nature right in front of Julian. I picked up my phone and dialed Marcus Thorne. The line rang twice before his gruff voice answered. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling," Marcus said. "Do we have a problem at the properties today?" "Not at the properties, Marcus," I replied, sinking into my leather desk chair. "I need you to do something for me, and I need it done quietly. I want you to pull the original blueprints and deeds for the basement vault. Make high-quality copies of the cover pages, the ones showing my name as the sole proprietor and the tax assessment values, but redact the security agreement with the Federal Depository. I do not want any mention of the reinforced steel or the security protocols. Make it look like a standard inactive storage space." Marcus was silent for a moment. He was a smart man, a former military logistics officer who never asked unnecessary questions unless he sensed danger. "Are we preparing for a sale?" "Sir, no," I said, my voice hardening. "We are preparing a trap. I have a rat sniffing around the perimeter, and I need to lay out some cheese. Put the redacted copies in a standard manila folder and have one of the trusted drivers drop it off at my house this afternoon." "Understood, sir. It will be there by 3 o'clock. I hung up the phone and leaned back in my chair, staring at the heavy steel safe. Chloe wanted access to my holdings. She wanted to review the deeds. I was going to give her exactly what she asked for, but on my terms. I would invite her over next week under the guise of discussing her proposal. I would hand her the redacted deeds, letting her think she was one step closer to getting my signature. I would play the hesitant but agreeable father-in-law, asking naive questions about venture capital and real estate markets. But I knew Chloe. People driven by sudden, desperate greed do not have the patience for slow negotiations. Her lingering look at my basement door told me everything I needed to know. She was evaluating the security of my home. She was wondering what else I kept locked away. If she was willing to manipulate my son to steal a vault, she was certainly willing to break into my private study to find leverage or cash. I stood up and walked over to the window. Looking out at the meticulously manicured lawn, the neighborhood was quiet, filled with families enjoying their peaceful Sunday morning. They had no idea that a quiet war was brewing inside the walls of my home. I needed to prepare the battlefield. I spent the next 2 hours securing the study. I went online and ordered 3 high-definition motion-activated hidden cameras. I chose models designed to look like ordinary objects: a digital clock, a smoke detector, and a charging brick. I paid for expedited shipping, ensuring they would arrive by Tuesday. I planned to position them to cover every angle of the room with a direct line of sight, focusing squarely on the vintage safe. Next, I decided to modify the safe itself. It contained important documents, family heirlooms, and a significant amount of emergency cash. I could not leave those assets vulnerable. I emptied the contents into a heavy duffel bag, intending to move them to a secure bank vault first thing Monday morning. I left only a few stacks of bundled single-dollar bills disguised with $100 bills on the outside. A classic decoy tactic I learned during my early days in the rough industrial zones. I also left a very specific fabricated document inside. It was a fake inventory sheet printed on official-looking company letterhead. The document detailed a fictional stockpile of unregistered industrial diamonds currently being housed in the basement vault. It noted the estimated value at $20 million and mentioned an impending quiet liquidation sale. It was the perfect bait, designed to appeal directly to a desperate person looking for a massive, untraceable payday. If Chloe managed to crack the safe, she would not find my life savings. She would find a one-way ticket to a federal prison sentence. She would find the very thing that would seal her fate. I closed the heavy steel door of the safe, spinning the dial to lock the tumblers in place. The metallic click echoed in the quiet room, a satisfying sound of finality. The board was set. The pieces were moving into position. Chloe thought she was the mastermind of this game, the brilliant influencer, outsmarting an outdated relic of the past. She was about to learn that you never step into a construction site unless you are fully prepared to get crushed by the machinery. I walked out of the study, locking the door firmly behind me. I went back to the kitchen, poured myself a fresh cup of dark roast coffee, and stepped out onto the back patio. The morning air was crisp and cool. I took a deep breath, feeling the tension slowly begin to leave my shoulders. I had made a promise to Eleanor, and I was going to keep it. I was going to protect our son, and I was going to absolutely destroy the woman who tried to use him against me. The hunt was on, and I was holding all the keys. I let 2 full weeks pass without giving Chloe a single update. I ignored her subtle text messages, dodged her casual phone calls, and maintained the perfect illusion of an old man dragging his feet. I needed her to stew in her own anxiety. I needed the pressure on her end to build until it cracked her polished exterior. That crack finally appeared on a crisp Tuesday morning, right in front of my son's architectural firm. Julian owned a beautiful little office in the historic district. He had poured his heart, his soul, and every ounce of his savings into that place. It always smelled of fresh drafting paper and coffee. I decided to drop by unannounced, bringing his favorite bagels from the bakery down the street. I parked my car a block away and walked toward his storefront, enjoying the brisk morning air. But as I rounded the corner, the picturesque scene of his charming office was shattered by the harsh, grinding sound of heavy diesel machinery. A massive battered tow truck was backed aggressively into the loading zone right behind Julian's office. The hydraulic lift was already engaged, whining loudly as it hoisted the front tires of Julian's custom company vehicle off the pavement. I quickened my pace, my heart giving a hard thump. Through the large glass windows of the office, I saw Julian. He was standing on the sidewalk, wrapping his coat tightly around himself, his shoulders shaking. He looked devastated. A burly man in a high-visibility vest was standing next to the tow truck, holding a clipboard and looking completely unimpressed by his distress. I rushed forward, dropping the bakery box onto a nearby wrought iron bench. "Julian, son, what is going on here?" I asked, wrapping a protective arm around his trembling shoulders. He looked up at me, his face pale. "Dad, I do not understand," he said, his voice cracking. "He says he is repossessing the car. He says we have missed 3 consecutive lease payments. But that is impossible. Chloe handles all the business accounts. She set up the auto pay for the commercial vehicles months ago. There has to be some kind of terrible mistake." I turned my gaze to the man with the clipboard. He had the tired, cynical look of a guy who dealt with people's worst days for a living. I approached him, keeping my tone level but firm. "Excuse me, friend. I think there might be a clerical error here. My son owns this business. We can clear this up right now." The repo man did not even blink. "Look, buddy, I just get the work orders," he said, tapping his pen against the metal clip. "The leasing company issued the recovery order yesterday afternoon. 3 months delinquent. No response to the warning letters. The grace period is over. I am just here to collect the asset. You want to argue the numbers? Call the bank." I reached into my breast pocket for my checkbook. I was fully prepared to write a check right there on the hood of his truck to stop my son's distress. But before my hand even unbuttoned my coat, the screech of tires echoed down the street. Chloe's leased luxury SUV swerved into the loading zone, mounting the curb aggressively before slamming to a halt. She threw her door open and sprinted toward us. She did not look like the confident, arrogant influencer who had sat in my living room 2 weeks ago. She looked like a woman running for her life. Her normally immaculate hair was disheveled, and her eyes were wild with a frantic, desperate energy. "Hey, stop right there," "Drop that vehicle immediately," Chloe shouted, waving her last as she marched up to the repo man. "What the hell do you think you are doing? This is a massive banking error. You are stealing private property." The tow truck driver crossed his arms over his chest. "Save the performance." "Lady, the account is empty. The payments bounced. I am hooking the rear axle and pulling out of here in 2 minutes." Chloe pulled a sleek smartphone from her pocket, her hands shaking so violently she almost dropped it onto the concrete. She was dialing numbers with frantic, jerky motions. "Listen to me very closely," she growled, pacing back and forth in a tight, agitated circle. "My brand management firm handles millions of dollars in liquid assets. My private bank flagged the auto draft as a fraudulent transaction because of a security update. It is a protective hold on the commercial account. That is all. I am transferring the funds from my personal portfolio right now." She shoved the phone against her ear, her jaw clamped so tight the muscles twitched. I watched her closely, letting my protective father persona mask the cold, calculating observation happening behind my eyes. I watched the heavy bead of sweat trace down the side of her neck. I watched the erratic, trembling rhythm of her hands. I saw the way her expensive designer shoes shifted restlessly against the pavement. Julian stepped forward, reaching out to touch her arm. "Chloe, what is happening? Why would the bank freeze the account for 3 months without telling us?" Chloe flinched away from his touch just for a fraction of a second. But I caught it. It was the physical reaction of a cornered animal. "Do not worry about it, Julian," she snapped, her voice much sharper than the gentle tone she usually reserved for him. "I told you it is a technical glitch. The wire transfers got crossed between the offshore holding and the domestic branch. I am fixing it. Just let me work." She spent the next 10 minutes arguing furiously with someone on the phone. She paced down the alleyway, her voice hushed but frantic, making wild pleading gestures with her free hand. Finally, she marched back to the repo man, shoving the phone into the driver's face. The driver listened for a moment, let out a loud, heavy sigh, and handed the phone back. "Fine," he muttered, looking at Chloe with absolute disgust. "The agency just confirmed a manual wire transfer. You bought yourself 30 days. Lady, but if that wire bounces back, I am coming straight to your driveway next time." With a loud hiss of releasing pressure, the hydraulic lift lowered Julian's vehicle back onto the pavement. The tow truck detached its heavy steel hooks and rattled away down the street, leaving a thick cloud of diesel exhaust in its wake. Julian let out a massive breath, leaning against the side of his car. "Good heavens," he whispered, rubbing his temples. That was terrifying. "Chloe, are you sure everything is okay with the business account?" Chloe forced a laugh, running a trembling hand through her ruined hair. She pulled Julian into a tight hug, kissing his cheek. "Everything is perfectly fine, Baba. I promise. Just a stupid clerical error at the bank. You know how these massive institutions operate? The algorithms flag a large transfer and suddenly everything freezes. I will have my assistant yell at our account manager this afternoon." Julian smiled, leaning into her embrace, entirely comforted by her words. But as Chloe looked over his shoulder, her eyes met mine. For one brief, unguarded second, the mask slipped completely. I did not see a wealthy influencer looking back at me. I saw pure, unadulterated terror. She quickly plastered her fake, arrogant smile back onto her face and clapped her hands together. "Well, crisis averted," she declared, her voice pitching an octave too high. "Arthur, good to see you. Sorry for the morning drama. Just the trials and tribulations of high-level corporate banking." Right. I replied smoothly, picking up the bakery box from the bench and handing it to Julian. High-level corporate banking. I hugged my son, kissed his cheek, and told him I would call him later. I walked back to my car, unlocked the door, and slid into the driver's seat. I did not start the engine immediately. I just sat there gripping the steering wheel, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Millionaire brand managers do not get their husbands' vehicles repossessed over a technical glitch. People who manage vast portfolios of liquid assets do not shake uncontrollably while trying to wire a few hundred to a collections agency. They do not pace like desperate addicts in a back alley. They do not look at a tow truck driver with absolute terror as if their life is on the line. Chloe Sterling was not experiencing a banking error. She was drowning. She was suffocating under a mountain of debt, scrambling to plug holes in a sinking ship. She had drained Julian's commercial accounts dry, leaving him completely exposed, completely vulnerable, and totally unaware of the financial ruin creeping up on him. My gut feeling had evolved from a simple suspicion into a hard, undeniable fact. My daughter-in-law was a desperate, dangerous fraud, and she was currently bleeding my son's business to death to keep herself afloat. She needed a massive infusion of cash to save her own skin, which explained exactly why she was suddenly so interested in liquidating my basement vault. She was hunting for a lifeline, and I was going to hand her an anvil. That Friday afternoon, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Julian on my porch with an overnight bag. Looking exhausted, Chloe stood behind him, gripping a duffel, wearing a strained smile. They claimed a plumbing issue flooded their master bathroom and ruined the carpets in their townhouse. The property management company, Chloe explained, needed the weekend to run industrial dehumidifiers. It sounded like a reasonable inconvenience. But I knew better. Millionaires do not pack their bags and flee to their father-in-law's guest room over a burst pipe. They check into a hotel downtown and let their insurance foot the bill. I smiled warmly, stepping aside, offering them the guest suite. I knew exactly why they were here. The plumbing issue was a fabricated excuse. Chloe was running out of time. Her creditors were circling. The repossession agency was breathing down her neck. And she needed unfettered access to my home. Having her sleep under my roof felt like inviting a venomous snake into my bed. But I played the gracious host. I cooked dinner, poured her a glass of wine, and listened to her boast about phantom investment portfolios. Julian leaned against her shoulder, blind to the frantic desperation radiating from her. By 10 o'clock, they excused themselves to bed. I waited until I heard the heavy oak door of the guest suite click shut. Then I retreated to my bedroom, leaving the door open just a crack. I did not sleep. I lay on top of my covers in the dark, fully clothed, listening to the ambient sounds of the house I had lived in for 3 decades. When you spend your life guarding construction sites filled with valuable materials, you become a very light sleeper. You learn to differentiate between the harmless settling of a foundation and the deliberate footfalls of a trespasser. The house was silent for hours. The grandfather clock in the foyer chimed midnight. Then 1 o'clock. The neighborhood was dead to the world. And then, at exactly 14 minutes past 2 in the morning, I heard it. It was a subtle, muffled groan of wood. The 4th floorboard in the upstairs hallway, right outside the guest suite, has a distinct squeak if you step squarely on its center. I swung my legs over the edge of the mattress and stood up, my bare feet silent against the carpet. I did not turn on any lights. I moved through the shadows of my home with the practiced ease of a man who knows every angle of his territory. I crept down the stairs, my breathing slow and measured. The downstairs hallway was bathed in the pale glow of the moonlight filtering through the high windows. I stopped at the bottom of the staircase, pressing my back against the cool plaster of the wall. Someone was moving around in my private study. The heavy mahogany door to the study was pushed open just a fraction of an inch. A thin beam of pale light sliced through the narrow gap, dancing across the hallway floor. I edged closer, leaning my head forward to peer through the crack. Chloe was inside. She was dressed in dark sweatpants and a black t-shirt. Holding a small pen light between her teeth, she was kneeling in front of my heavy fireproof filing cabinet, the one positioned directly beneath the framed photograph of Eleanor. She had bypassed the vintage steel safe in the corner. She must have realized during her first visit that she lacked the tools to crack a mechanical combination lock. Instead, she was focusing on the filing cabinet, utilizing a thin metal tension wrench and a lockpick to manipulate the simple cylinder lock holding the drawers shut. I watched her work. Her breathing was heavy, ragged, echoing in the quiet room. Her hands were shaking with a terrifying, unhinged urgency. She was not a professional thief. She was a desperate woman backed into a corner, completely devoid of morals or boundaries. The lock gave way with a soft metallic click. Chloe practically ripped the bottom drawer open. She began tearing through the hanging folders, tossing aside utility bills, property deeds, and old tax returns. She was hunting for something specific. She wanted liquid numbers. She wanted to know exactly what I was worth and how quickly she could get her hands on it to pay off the monsters breathing down her neck. I let her search for another full minute, absorbing the sheer audacity of her betrayal. She was standing in the house my sweat had paid for, trying to steal the future I had secured for the man sleeping upstairs. I stepped into the doorway, raised my hand, and firmly flicked the brass light switch on the wall. The study was instantly flooded with harsh, bright yellow light. Chloe gasped, a sharp, terrified sound, and physically recoiled. She dropped the pen light onto the carpet and spun around, her eyes wide, her chest heaving. She looked like a deer caught in the headlights of an oncoming freight train. "Chloe," I said, keeping my voice mild, almost grogged, as if I had just woken up from a deep slumber. "What on earth are you doing down here in the dark? Is everything all right with the guest room?" For 3 agonizing seconds, she stared at me, her mind clearly scrambling to process the situation and invent a plausible lie. Then the slick, manipulative con artist took over. She let out a breathless, forced chuckle and ran a hand through her hair, leaning casually against the filing cabinet to block my view of the open drawer behind her legs. "Arthur," she exhaled, placing a hand over her heart in a gesture of exaggerated relief. "You scared the living daylights out of me. I am so sorry for sneaking around. I woke up with terrible heartburn. That spicy dinner we had really did a number on my stomach. I did not want to wake Julian, so I came downstairs looking for the kitchen. I must have gotten turned around in the dark and wandered into your office. I was just trying to find a light switch." I smiled, a gentle, accommodating smile that masked the absolute disgust boiling in my veins. "Of course, dear," I said, my tone dripping with fake sympathy. "The kitchen is down the hall to the left. I keep a bottle of antacids in the pantry above the sink. Let me go grab them for you." I turned and walked to the kitchen, leaving her alone for just a few seconds. When I returned and handed her the chalky tablets, she thanked me profusely, wishing me a good night before hurrying back upstairs. I waited until her footsteps faded completely. Then I walked back into my study. She had closed the cabinet drawer, but in her blind panic, she made a careless mistake. I pulled the drawer open and looked inside. The folder detailing my total net worth and liquid cash reserves was pulled halfway up, sticking out awkwardly from the rest of the meticulously organized files. She had found exactly what she was looking for right there in the quiet house. The next morning, I stood in the kitchen, casually flipping through the newspaper. Julian came downstairs first, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, and hugged me. Chloe followed shortly after, looking surprisingly refreshed for a woman who had spent the early hours of the morning picking the lock on a filing cabinet. She greeted me with hollow enthusiasm, pouring coffee and chatting about the weather. I played the gracious host, offering a warm smile and asking if her heartburn had settled down. She assured me it had, completely oblivious to what I actually knew. The hidden cameras had been discreetly installed while Julian and Chloe were running errands the previous afternoon. One was tucked inside a digital clock on the living room mantel, offering a sweeping view of the seating area. I knew how to rig a trap to catch a rat. Chloe had taken the bait in the study, but a slightly displaced file folder was not enough to condemn her. If I brought it up to Julian, she would simply spin a dozen believable lies. I needed irrefutable proof. I needed her caught in the act, captured on high-definition video, completely violating my trust. After breakfast, Julian mentioned he needed a shower before a meeting. Chloe said she was going to read in the living room. It was the perfect opportunity. I casually told them I was going for a walk. As I passed through the living room, I pulled my tablet from my briefcase. I unlocked the screen. Leaving the auto lock disabled, I opened my email and pulled up a carefully fabricated message I had created the night prior. It looked like confidential correspondence from my wealth management bank. The subject read, "Urgent portfolio liquidation." The body detailed a fictional impending transfer of $8 million into a highly liquid checking account. It was the ultimate prize for a drowning woman. I placed the unlocked tablet gently onto the center of the coffee table right next to Chloe. I grabbed my walking stick, called out a cheerful goodbye to the empty hallway, and walked out the front door, pulling it shut with a loud 80 hours ansys. Definitive click. I did not go for a walk. I walked 2 blocks down the street and slid into my car. I pulled out my smartphone and immediately opened the secure application linked to my hidden cameras. The live feed buffered before snapping into crystal clear high-definition focus. I stared at the small screen, my breathing slow and steady, watching the silent movie play out inside my living room. For the first 2 minutes, Chloe did nothing. She sat on the sofa holding a magazine, staring blankly. She was listening. She was waiting to ensure Julian was upstairs and I was genuinely gone. The faint sound of the running shower provided the all-clear signal. She lowered the magazine. Her head snapped toward the coffee table, her eyes locking onto the glowing screen of my tablet. She stared at it as if it were a pile of gold bullion. The internal debate lasted only a matter of seconds. The sheer intoxicating lure of the fabricated email was simply too strong for her to resist. She leaned forward, casting a quick, paranoid glance over her shoulder toward the staircase, seeing nothing but empty space. She reached out and snatched the tablet right off the glass table. The camera feed captured her face with agonizing clarity. The polished mask of the successful influencer vanished, replaced by the feral, hungry expression of a scavenger. Her eyes darted across the screen. Reading the fake email, I watched her jaw drop slightly. She practically vibrated with adrenaline. $8 million in liquid cash ready to be transferred. It was the exact lifeline she had been desperately hunting for. Chloe did not just read the email. She immediately pulled her own sleek smartphone from her pocket. Her hands were shaking so violently she had to rest her elbows on her knees to steady the camera lens. She began snapping pictures of the tablet screen, capturing the fake account numbers, the routing details, and the contact information for the fictional bank manager. The dam had broken, and her greed was in complete control. I watched in cold disgust as she closed the email application and began frantically swiping through my private device. She opened my digital banking apps, my investment portfolios, and my personal text messages. She was searching for passwords, security questions, anything she could use to drain my assets dry. She photographed every single screen. She was moving with a terrifying, unhinged speed, her thumbs flying across the glass. This was no longer a misunderstanding. This was not a banking error. And it was certainly not a concerned daughter-in-law trying to protect her family. The plausible lie was utterly dead. I was watching a calculated predatory invasion of privacy. I was watching a thief meticulously planning the destruction of my life's work. My hands tightened around the steering wheel until the leather creaked. I felt a deep sorrow for Julian. He was upstairs washing his hair, completely oblivious to the fact that the woman he loved was actively trying to rob his father blind. Chloe thought she had hit the ultimate jackpot. She thought she had stumbled upon the key to solving her massive financial failures. She had no idea that every frantic swipe was being recorded and stored on a secure cloud server, building an impenetrable wall of evidence against her. After 5 minutes of frantic digital pillaging, the sound of the upstairs shower must have shut off. Glue froze. Her head snapped up. She hastily closed all the applications on the tablet, returning it to the exact screen and position where I had left it. She dropped her phone back into her pocket, picked up her magazine, and leaned back against the sofa cushions. Crossing her legs in a picture of relaxed leisure, she wiped a bead of nervous sweat from her brow, her eyes darting one last time toward the stairs. Just to be absolutely certain she was safe, she took a deep breath, smoothing her hair and adjusting her collar, instantly transforming back into the perfect, supportive wife. I closed the application on my phone, plunging the screen into darkness. The silence inside my car was absolute. I sat there for a few moments, letting the cold reality settle deep into my bones. The hunt was over. The trap had sprung, and the rat was caught. I would not let her take away the life that Eleanor and I had built. This was my domain, and she had made a fatal miscalculation today. I now possessed the exact leverage I needed to completely destroy Chloe Sterling and sever her parasitic hold on my son. I took a deep, steady breath, pushed open the heavy door, and began the short walk back to my house. The deception was finished, and the time for patience had passed. I was ready to tear down her illusion and show Julian the truth. The morning after I watched my daughter-in-law try to steal my digital identity, I told Julian and Chloe I was going to the store. Instead, I drove my car to a faded diner. I slid into a corner booth. 10 minutes later, Marcus pulled into the parking lot. He was the private investigator I had retained decades ago. He was a quiet man who possessed a talent for finding the dirt people buried deep underground. He slid into the booth across from me, placing a thick manila folder on the scratched Formica table. He did not bother with pleasantries. He just ordered a black coffee and looked at me with grim, tired eyes. "You were right to trust your gut on this one, Arthur," Marcus said. I dug into Chloe Sterling and her brand management firm. The entire operation is a facade constructed of smoke and mirrors. I kept my hands resting flat on the table. Tell me exactly what we are dealing with. Marcus opened the folder. He slid a grainy photograph of a strip mall across the table. Sterling Brand Management does not exist. It is a rented post office box inside a shipping center. There is no corporate office. There is no board of directors. There is no massive portfolio of liquid assets. She is registered as a sole proprietor. But she has not filed a legitimate corporate tax return in over 3 years. I felt my jaw tighten. How is she affording the designer clothes and the leased luxury SUVs? How did she manage to fool Julian? Marcus slid another piece of paper toward me. 2 years ago, Chloe actually had some money. She received a decent inheritance from her late grandmother. She poured every single penny of it into a massive cryptocurrency scheme. She thought she was going to become a billionaire overnight. Instead, the platform collapsed. She lost her entire inheritance in the span of 48 hours. My stomach twisted into a heavy knot. She lost everything. Worse than everything. Marcus corrected, leaning forward. When she lost her inheritance, she tried to chase her losses. She started borrowing money to buy back into the market, hoping for a miraculous rebound. When the legitimate banks cut her off, she went to the shadow lenders. She currently owes just over $2 million to a very dangerous loan shark syndicate operating out of Boston. I stared at the red numbers. The puzzle pieces slammed into place with sickening clarity. The desperate pacing in the alleyway, the sheer terror in her eyes when the tow truck driver threatened to return, the frantic attempt to break into my filing cabinet, and the joy on her face when she saw the fake email detailing an $8 million transfer. Chloe was a dead woman walking. The people she owed money to did not send angry letters. They sent men to break legs and burn down houses. There is more. Arthur, Marcus said softly. And this is the part that is going to make you want to kill her. Marcus pulled a final stack of papers from the folder. They were detailed transaction logs. I recognized the account name immediately. It was the commercial business account for Julian's architectural firm. I pulled the financial records for your son's firm. Marcus explained, his tone heavy with sympathy. When they got married, Chloe convinced Julian to let her handle the accounting. She told him it would take the stress off his shoulders. But she has not been managing his accounts. She has been systematically draining them. I picked up the papers, my hands trembling slightly. Every week for the past 8 months, Chloe had been siphoning thousands of dollars out of Julian's business account. She was routing the money through a maze of shell companies, desperately trying to scrape together enough cash to make the minimum monthly interest payments on her $2 million syndicate debt. She stopped paying his commercial leases 3 months ago. Marcus continued, that is why his company vehicle was repossessed yesterday. She stopped paying his wholesale suppliers. She stopped paying the firm's utility bills. His business is completely insolvent. Arthur, he is operating on fumes. By the end of this month, the bank will freeze his accounts and he will be forced into bankruptcy. The air in my lungs turned to ash. Julian had built that firm from nothing. He had spent countless nights awake at his drafting table, sketching blueprints and building a clientele. It was his dream, his pride and joy. And his wife was bleeding it dry behind his back to save her own miserable life. She was destroying him. She is using him as a human shield. I whispered, my voice sounding rough. She is drowning. Arthur, Marcus said, pushing the folder toward me. And when a person like Chloe starts to drown, she will pull down whoever is closest to her just to get another breath of air. She targeted you because you are her last resort. She saw your properties, and she thought she could manipulate you into signing over an asset. She needs a massive payout right now. If she does not get it, those loan sharks will come. I reached out and placed my hand over the manila folder. I felt a sudden, profound calm wash over me. It was the same cold, calculating focus I used to feel when I was standing on a construction site preparing to demolish a massive, dangerous structure. There was no room for error. There was no room for hesitation. Every move had to be precise, deliberate, and devastating. Chloe had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. She had manipulated my son's heart. She had stolen his hard-earned money. She had brought the shadow of violent, dangerous criminals right to our doorstep. She had looked me in the eye and smiled while she actively planned the destruction of my family. "Thank you, Marcus," I said, sliding the folder into my briefcase. "You did exceptional work. What are you going to do?" "Arthur," Marcus asked, watching me closely, "if you need me to contact the authorities, I have friends in the Financial Crimes Division. We can have her arrested for fraud before the end of the week." I shook my head slowly, finishing my coffee. "No. The authorities would just put her in a cell. That is too easy. That is an escape. If she goes to prison now, Julian will think it is a mistake. He will think she was just a businesswoman who got in over her head. He will visit her. He will pity her. I need him to see exactly who she is. I need him to see the monster hiding behind the tailored blazer." I slowly slid out of the booth and stood up, gripping the handle of my briefcase. I walked out of the diner and back to my car. I placed the folder on the empty passenger seat right next to the tablet that contained the video of Chloe trying to rob me blind. The hunt was officially over. It was finally time for the execution. I pulled out of the diner parking lot and merged onto the interstate, heading straight for the busy downtown business district. The short drive took less than 20 minutes, but my mind frantically raced through 1,000 different scenarios. The manila folder and the silver tablet sat on my passenger seat like unexploded ordnance. I parked my car in the underground garage of a sleek glass high-rise and took the private elevator up to the 14th floor. Nathaniel Reed had been my corporate attorney and trusted confidant for over 25 years. He was the man who navigated the complex legal waters when Eleanor and I first expanded our real estate operation into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. Nathaniel was a shark in a tailored suit, a man who believed in the absolute power of an ironclad contract. His secretary ushered me immediately into his spacious corner office. Nathaniel stood up from behind his massive oak desk, a warm smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. But his expression sobered the moment he saw my face. He knew me too well. He knew the difference between a social visit and a man preparing for war. "Sit down, Arthur," Nathaniel said, gesturing to the heavy leather chairs opposite his desk. "You look like you are about to tear a building apart with your bare hands. What is going on?" I did not waste time with pleasantries. I opened my briefcase, took out the thick manila folder Marcus had given me, and placed it squarely on his pristine desk. Then, I set the tablet right next to it, pulling up the hidden camera footage from my living room. "I want you to review these financial logs, Nathaniel, and then I want you to watch this video," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Take your time. I will wait right here." Nathaniel frowned. Picking up the heavy folder, he adjusted his silver-rimmed glasses and began to read. For the first few minutes, the only sound in the office was the steady ticking of his antique wall clock and the crisp rustle of turning pages. I watched his professional composure slowly crack. His jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed in sheer disbelief. When he reached the transaction logs detailing the systematic draining of Julian's business account, he let out a low, harsh breath He set the papers down and pressed play on the tablet screen. He watched the high-definition footage of my daughter-in-law frantically photographing my fabricated banking details, swiping through my personal data like a desperate, starving scavenger. When the video ended, Nathaniel pushed the tablet away as if it were contaminated. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose, looking at me with an expression of profound, chilling gravity. "Arthur, this is absolutely catastrophic," Nathaniel said, his voice dropping into a hushed, urgent register. "This woman is not just a fraud. She is actively committing grand larceny against your son. She is attempting to breach your secure financial networks, and if what these investigative reports say about her $2 million debt to the Boston syndicate is true, she is bringing incredibly dangerous, violent criminals directly into your family's orbit. We cannot wait a single second on this." Nathaniel reached for his desk phone, his fingers hovering over the keypad. "I am calling the Financial Crimes Division right now. I have a contact at the Federal Bureau who handles syndicate-related extortion and fraud. We hand over this folder. We hand over the video. And they will have Chloe in handcuffs before dinner. We can freeze her assets, secure Julian's remaining business capital, and get a protective order in place by tomorrow morning. Put the phone down." "Nathaniel," I said, my voice slicing through the quiet room like a razor. Nathaniel froze, staring at me in sheer, unadulterated disbelief. "Arthur, did you not hear a word I just said? The woman owes $2 million to literal loan sharks. She is bleeding, Julian, completely dry. If she realizes the bank transfer she photographed on your tablet is a fake, she will panic. Desperate people do desperate, violent things. We have to bring the police into this immediately." I leaned forward, resting my forearms on his desk, locking my eyes with his. "If we call the police right now, we lose everything," I stated, measuring every single syllable to ensure he understood the gravity of my choice. Nathaniel looked utterly exasperated. "How do you figure that?" "You have the evidence. You have her dead to rights. I have legal evidence," I replied, keeping my emotions tightly leashed. "I do not have emotional evidence. You are a lawyer. Nathaniel, you look at this entire situation through the rigid lens of a courtroom. I am looking at this through the eyes of a father. You know my son. You know how fiercely loyal he is. Chloe has spent 3 entire years grooming him, isolating him, and convincing him that she is the perfect, devoted wife. She has completely manipulated his reality." I paused, letting the immense weight of my words settle heavily into the quiet room. "If the police kick down their front door tonight and drag her away in handcuffs, what do you honestly think he is going to do? He is a masterful liar. She will spin a story so fast it will make your head spin. She will tell Julian that I set her up because I never liked her. She will claim the tablet incident was just her trying to help me manage my complex accounts, and the missing money from his firm was a temporary investment strategy that accidentally went wrong. She will play the absolute victim. She will cry. She will beg. And she will convince him that his paranoid, controlling father framed her simply to ruin their marriage." Nathaniel slowly lowered his hand from the black phone receiver. He leaned back in his heavy leather chair, his expression softening as the harsh reality of the psychological dynamic finally sank in. He would absolutely defend her, Nathaniel murmured, shaking his head. He would defend her to his last breath. I confirmed, feeling a dull ache in my chest. He would pool whatever money he has left to hire her a costly defense attorney. He would turn his back on me, and she would use his blind loyalty to drag this out in the courts for years. She would drain him dry while fighting the charges. And I would lose my son forever. I cannot afford a partial victory. I promised Eleanor I would protect our boy. And throwing Chloe in a cell while she still holds his heart is not protection. It is an absolute disaster. So what is your play, Arthur? Nathaniel asked, lacing his fingers together over his desk. I am going to build an inescapable trap, I said, my tone hardening. I am going to hand her the rope. And I am going to build the gallows right in my living room. Julian needs to see her monstrosity with his own eyes. He needs to watch the mask fall off completely, leaving her exposed without room for manipulation. I left Nathaniel Reed sitting silently behind his massive oak desk, still staring at the frozen tablet screen as if it were a highly venomous snake. The drive to the estate felt like crossing into another world. I pulled my car through the heavy iron gates. I carefully parked near the main house. Marcus Thorne was already waiting for me at the service entrance. Marcus had been my estate manager for 22 years. He ran the operation with military precision. He did not ask questions as I led him inside the basement vault. Close the door. Marcus, I said, tossing my briefcase onto the battered metal desk we kept down there. I need absolute silence for this. Marcus clicked the deadbolt into place. Whatever you need. Mr. Sterling, we are ready. I sat down in the creaky office chair and pulled out a stack of blank official company letterheads. The paper was thick. Watermarked with the original logo Eleanor had proudly designed 30 years ago. I need us to manufacture a lie. Marcus, I said, I need an inventory manifest that looks so highly classified, so undeniably lucrative, that a desperate person would risk federal prison to get their hands on it. Marcus raised a dark, questioning eyebrow, but nodded slowly in agreement. What specific kind of inventory are we talking about? Unregistered industrial diamonds. I replied firmly. The most untraceable, high-yield assets on the market. I took a slow, deep, and steadying breath. It was finally time to trap her. We spent the next 2 grueling hours meticulously crafting the perfect inescapable decoy. We built a detailed logistical manifest. Marcus dictated the exact carat weights and storage codes to make the document look flawlessly authentic. We created a fabricated paper trail detailing a massive off-the-books operation involving decommissioned industrial equipment. According to the document, my company had accumulated these diamonds over a decade. It stated the materials were unregistered and sitting off the grid. We placed the value at $20 million. And the location? Marcus asked, pulling a heavy file from the storage cabinet. We list the storage location as the basement vault, I answered, a cold smile touching the corners of my mouth. The exact property she is already trying to force me to renovate. It makes perfect sense. She will think I am hoarding the diamonds there. Refusing to open the space to avoid exposing the illegal stockpile, Marcus printed the final document. The ink gave the manifest a deeply confidential appearance. I took a red ink stamp from the top drawer and slammed it down across the top margin of the first page. Highly confidential, eyes only. I slid the documents into a worn manila envelope. Tying the string closure in a specific knot I could recognize if tampered with. You be very careful with this, boss, Marcus suddenly warned, his voice incredibly low and deadly serious as I walked toward the heavy door. $20 million in untraceable diamonds is definitely going to make her highly dangerous. A cornered, starving animal will absolutely bite. I know exactly how a cornered animal bites. Marcus, I replied. That is exactly why I am leading her straight into a cage. I walked confidently through the house. I knew exactly why they were here. Chloe was running out of time. Her creditors were circling. I walked slowly down the long hallway and carefully unlocked the heavy mahogany door to my private study. Afternoon light cast long shadows across the floor. I walked over to the fireproof filing cabinet that Chloe had picked open the previous night. I pulled the bottom drawer open. I strategically wedged the thick manila envelope halfway down between my legitimate tax returns and my original property deeds. I left the red confidential stamp just slightly exposed, catching the dim light in the drawer. It was an irresistible beacon for a person searching for salvation. I did not want her fumbling with tension wrenches again. I wanted her to slide it open and find her prize with agonizing ease. Next, I checked the hidden cameras I had installed. The tiny lens in the smoke detector had a perfect, unobstructed view of the filing cabinet. The digital clock on the bookshelf captured the doorway. Every square inch of the study was covered. I pulled out my phone and verified the live feed. The high-definition video was pristine, ready to record every single movement. I walked out of the study, leaving the door cracked open exactly 1.5 inches. It was a subtle invitation, a psychological lure designed to whisper to her paranoia and her greed. She would walk past that door tonight. She would see the sliver of darkness, and her addiction to the hunt would force her inside. I spent the remainder of the long evening playing the difficult role of the comforting, utterly oblivious father. When Julian and Chloe returned, they looked utterly exhausted. Julian's eyes were red from the stress, and Chloe maintained a facade of furious, righteous indignation about the incompetent banking system holding their funds hostage. I made dinner, offered encouraging words, and watched her perform. She was a spectacular liar, kissing my son's forehead and promising him that everything would be resolved by Monday. Beneath the glass table, her right knee bounced continuously with an erratic, wildly uncontrollable tremor. The $2 million syndicate debt was eating her alive from the inside out. She was running out of time, running out of lies, and running out of money. She needed a miracle. At exactly 10:30, they politely excused themselves to the guest suite. I retreated to my bedroom, leaving my door open just a fraction. I lay down on the mattress, fully clothed, holding my phone in the palm of my hand. The screen was dark, but the camera application was primed and ready. I did not have to wait until 2 a.m. This time, the desperation was accelerating. At exactly midnight, the floorboard in the upstairs hallway groaned. The soft padding sound of footsteps descended the staircase. I raised my phone, unlocking the screen, and tapped the live feed icon. The digital clock camera in the study flickered to life. The heavy mahogany door silently pushed open, casting a long shadow across the carpet. Chloe Sterling stepped into the room, swallowed the bait, and sealed her own fate. The morning after Chloe broke into my study, the atmosphere in the house was thick with an unspoken tension. At breakfast, Chloe was practically vibrating with a manic, poorly concealed energy. She drank her coffee too fast, her eyes darting around the room. Completely unable to sit still, she told Julian they needed to head back to their townhouse, claiming the property management company had finally cleared the plumbing issue. Julian looked relieved, completely unaware that his wife was actually rushing to execute a phantom heist. I helped them carry their bags to the driveway, playing the role of the sad, lonely father saying goodbye to his beloved son. I hugged Julian tightly, resting my chin on his shoulder. I promised him I would come down to the firm later in the week. Then I turned to Chloe. I shook her hand, wishing her luck with her brand management meetings. As I handed her her heavy leather briefcase, my thumb brushed against the hidden magnetic lining of the side pocket. Earlier that morning, while she was in the shower washing off the sweat of her midnight burglary, I had slipped a tiny state-of-the-art listening device deep into the seams of the leather. It was barely the size of a coin, equipped with a long-lasting battery and a cellular transmitter. I watched them pull out of the driveway, the taillights of her leased SUV fading into the distance. I did not go back inside the house. I walked straight to my car, climbed into the driver's seat, and locked the doors. I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened the secure audio application. The digital interface hummed to life, connecting to the transmitter buried in Chloe's briefcase. For the first 20 minutes, I heard nothing but the ambient noise of the highway and the soft murmur of the radio. Then, I heard the distinct sound of the passenger door opening and closing. She had dropped Julian off at his firm. The moment he was out of the car, the entire audio landscape shifted. The radio was abruptly turned off. I could hear Chloe breathing. It was heavy, ragged, and frantic. The sound of a woman running out of oxygen. I heard the aggressive squeal of tires as she accelerated in Hafen, driving erratically. A few minutes later, the car came to a sudden halt, the transmission grinding into park. I closed my eyes, leaning my head back against the headrest, and listened. I heard the rapid, erratic tapping of a phone keypad. The line rang 3 times before a voice answered. It was a low, gravelly voice, entirely devoid of warmth or professional courtesy. The voice simply said one word, speaking her name. Chloe exhaled a shaky breath, her voice pitching high with an edge of absolute desperation. "Listen to me," she pleaded, the words spilling out of her mouth in a frantic rush. "I know the payment is late. I know we are past the grace period, but you have to listen to me right now. I just found the ultimate score. I have the solution to everything. It is bigger than anything we ever discussed." The gravelly voice on the other end cut through her panic like a blunt knife. "We are not interested in your empty promises. Chloe, we gave you 2 weeks to liquidate the husband's business assets. You missed the deadline. The boss is out of patience. You owe $2 million. You have 48 hours to deliver the cash. Or we are sending a crew to your house to collect our payment in flesh." "No. You do not understand," Chloe yelled, her voice echoing sharply inside her car. "I am not talking about the architectural firm. That place is completely drained. There is nothing left to squeeze out of it. I am talking about $20 million in unregistered, untraceable industrial diamonds." The line went dead silent for a moment. I could practically feel the heavy lands. Dangerous shift in the atmosphere through the audio feed. "Explain," the loan shark commanded, his tone suddenly sharp and attentive. Chloe swallowed hard, her breathing shuddering into the microphone. "My father-in-law. He is an old real estate developer. He owns properties all over the city. I thought he was just a clueless old man sitting on useless real estate. But I got into his private study last night. I found his confidential holding manifests. He has been stockpiling decommissioned industrial diamonds off the books for a decade. He has a massive cache sitting in a secure vault right beneath his estate. The basement vault. I saw the official paperwork with my own eyes. It is completely off the grid. The government does not know it exists. Are you telling me this old man is sitting on 20 million in raw diamonds and you can get to it?" The loan shark asked, a predatory edge creeping into his voice. "I can get you full access." Chloe insisted, her words tripping over each other in her rush to save her own skin. He is old and trusting. He is practically begging me to manage his assets. Give me 3 days. Just give me 72 hours. I will get the keys to the vault. I will give you the exact layout and the security codes. You send your crew in, and you take the entire stockpile. We fence the diamonds. You take your 2 million proboscis. You take an extra $1 million for the trouble. And I keep the rest. It is a clean, untraceable ghost job. There was another long, suffocating pause. I sat in my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel. The leather groaned under the immense crushing pressure of my fingers. I was listening to the woman who shared a bed with my son actively broker a massive criminal heist against my family. She was selling me out to violent thugs to save her own miserable life. 3 days. The loan shark finally agreed. His voice cold and menacing. You have 72 hours to deliver the vault access. If you are lying to us, Chloe, if this is another one of your pathetic delays, we are not just going to break your legs. We are going to take your husband. We know where his little firm is. We know his routine. We will take him. And we will make you watch what happens when you cross us. The air in my lungs turned to jagged glass. My heart hammered furiously against my ribs. I waited for Chloe to defend her husband. I waited for her to tell the loan shark to leave Julian out of this, to show a single shred of human decency. Chloe let out a cold, cynical laugh. You can do whatever you want with him, she said, her voice entirely devoid of emotion. Give me the 3 days. I will get you the diamonds. Take your cut. And I am taking my share and catching the first flight to Dubai. I lowered my phone, letting the screen fade to black as the chilling echo of Chloe's final sentence hung in the heavy air of my car. She was willing to sacrifice her own husband. She was perfectly willing to hand Julian over to violent, merciless loan sharks just to buy herself enough time to flee the country. A cold, dark fury wrapped around my heart, squeezing until my chest ached. I had suspected she was a greedy, manipulative coward. But hearing her casually discard my son's life like a piece of worthless trash stripped away any lingering shred of mercy I might have harbored. This was no longer just about protecting my financial assets or teaching an arrogant daughter-in-law a harsh lesson about respect. This was about completely eradicating a dangerous predator who had woven herself into the very fabric of my family. She had sealed her own fate with those callous words. I did not feel pity for her anymore. I only felt a deep, unwavering resolve to see my plan through to its devastating conclusion. Chloe thought she possessed the upper hand. She genuinely believed she had outsmarted a clueless old developer. She believed she was coordinating the perfect untraceable heist that would wash away her massive debts and fund her luxurious escape to Dubai. She had swallowed the bait completely, taking the fabricated inventory manifest as absolute gospel. She was currently visualizing a vast hidden cache of gleaming diamonds, calculating the millions of dollars she was about to steal from under my nose. But Chloe was a fool who relied on superficial assumptions. She saw a faded corporate logo and a dusty filing cabinet, and she concluded she knew the entire scope of my operations. She had no idea what the basement vault actually represented. There were absolutely no diamonds stored in that room. There was no secret stockpile. And there was certainly no unregistered wealth waiting to be fenced by a syndicate crew. The manifest I had left perfectly exposed in my study was a pure, unadulterated work of fiction. The basement vault was empty of valuables, but it was far from abandoned. Exactly 5 years ago, a specialized federal agency had quietly approached me with a highly lucrative completely confidential proposition. My estate was situated on prime, easily accessible, yet heavily shielded land. The vault was isolated, positioned perfectly for discreet operations. It was a tactical goldmine for anyone requiring absolute privacy and heavy security. I had leased the entire subterranean structure to a federal cybersecurity division. They are the premier contractors responsible for managing and moving immense volumes of classified digital data for the government. From the outside, the facility looks exactly like a forgotten relic of a bygone architectural era. I intentionally kept the exterior aesthetic completely unassuming. It is a masterpiece of suburban camouflage designed to make people look away, but the interior of the vault is an entirely different reality. Behind those reinforced steel doors lies a heavily fortified military-grade staging ground. The concrete walls were reinforced with thick steel plating, capable of withstanding explosive breaches. The subterranean foundation is laced with seismic sensors. When the federal agents move massive data drives across the region, they do not just use standard commercial networks. They bring them into secure, impenetrable hubs to transfer loads and rotate heavily armed security personnel. The building is wired with a network of silent federal alarms that link directly to regional law enforcement dispatch and the Federal Bureau. The main floor is crisscrossed with invisible motion lasers that activate the second the primary perimeter is breached. Furthermore, there is a permanent tactical unit of highly trained, heavily armed federal guards stationed inside the control room 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They do not carry standard sidearms. They carry military assault rifles, and they are authorized to use absolute lethal force against any unauthorized intruders attempting to access the vault. I sat in the quiet cabin of my car, a slow, grim smile spreading across my face as I envisioned the magnificent disaster Chloe was actively orchestrating. She was currently convincing a dangerous syndicate of violent loan sharks to mobilize a professional robbery crew. She was giving them stolen coordinates, promising them a soft target guarded by an oblivious old man and a few rusty padlocks. She was preparing to lead heavily armed thugs directly into the jaws of a supreme federal stronghold by breaking into the basement vault. Chloe Sterling was not merely orchestrating a simple burglary. She was not just stealing from her wealthy father-in-law to cover her massive cryptocurrency losses. She was coordinating a direct aggressive assault on a highly classified federal data staging facility. The moment she and her hired muscle breached those reinforced exterior doors, they would trigger the silent alarms. They would instantly face a barrage of motion lasers and a tactical team of federal guards who did not ask polite questions. Chloe was about to commit a Class A federal felony. There would be no clever negotiations. There would be no smooth-talking her way out of a holding cell. And there would be no high-priced defense attorney capable of rescuing her from the devastating weight of federal prosecution. The government does not negotiate with individuals who attempt to raid their classified hubs. They bury them under decades of mandatory minimum sentences in maximum security penitentiaries. She wanted the ultimate score to secure her escape to Dubai. And instead, I was handing her a one-way ticket to federal prison. She had callously decided to let my beloved son rot with his bankrupt architectural firm, completely unconcerned about the emotional and financial devastation she was leaving in her wake. Now she would be the one rotting behind thick iron bars, surrounded by the very criminals she had foolishly tried to double-cross. The trap was flawlessly designed, absolutely inescapable, and primed to snap shut the very second she made her move. I turned the key in the ignition, listening to the steady, comforting rumble of my engine. I shifted the car into drive and pulled slowly away from the curb. The countdown had officially begun. I had given her exactly 72 hours to hang herself. Every single piece was now perfectly arranged on the massive chessboard. I was going to thoroughly enjoy watching every last second of her spectacular and utterly undeniable downfall. She had dared to threaten my family. Assuming I was weak and blind, she was about to learn that true power operates silently, striking only when victory is guaranteed. 72 hours passed with the agonizing slowness of a ticking bomb. During those 3 days, I watched Chloe operate with a manic, terrifying efficiency. She spent hours locked in the guest room, making hushed phone calls and finalizing the logistics of her massive betrayal. She fed Julian a steady diet of charming lies, assuring him that her sudden late-night meetings were simply the final hurdles before a massive brand management breakthrough. Julian absorbed every word. That Friday night, Chloe announced she had a mandatory after-hours dinner with an international investor. She kissed his cheek and drove away to coordinate a violent robbery. I waited exactly 2 hours after her departure. At 1:45, I walked into the living room where Julian was curled up on the sofa reading a book. I told him to put his coat on. I told him we needed to take a drive. He looked up at me, his brow furrowed in genuine confusion. He gestured toward the grandfather clock in the hallway, pointing out the late hour and protesting that he was already dressed for bed. I did not raise my voice, nor did I offer room for negotiation. I simply told him that I had found something belonging to his mother, something deeply important regarding Eleanor and her old neighborhood, and I needed to show it to him right now. The mention of his mother was the only key capable of bypassing his resistance. Julian sighed, setting his book aside with a mild groan of annoyance, and pulled a heavy wool coat over his shoulders. He followed me out to the driveway and climbed into the passenger seat of my car. The drive was cloaked in a thick, oppressive silence. Julian stared out the window as we left the pristine lawns of our affluent suburb behind. The smooth asphalt of the residential streets gave way to the cracked roads of the industrial district near the estate borders. The bright streetlights faded, replaced by flickering lamps that cast a yellow glow over the decaying landscape. Julian shifted uncomfortably in his leather seat. He asked where we were going, his annoyance morphing into a subtle anxiety. I kept my eyes fixed firmly on the road ahead. I told him to be patient. I told him that some truths could only be understood when viewed in the absolute dark. I navigated the labyrinth of estate roads with practiced ease. This was my territory, a world built on planning and structure that Chloe thought she could casually exploit. I turned down a narrow service road flanked by towering walls of old brick. I killed the headlights, letting the vehicle roll silently through the dense shadows until we reached a secluded alleyway near the service entrance. I brought the vehicle to a halt and shifted the transmission into park. The engine idled with a steady hum, the only sound in the darkness. Julian peered out his window, his eyes adjusting to the gloom. He looked at the massive, reinforced structure looming directly across the street from our concealed vantage point. It was the basement vault entrance. From our position in the dark alley, the building looked like a forgotten tomb. The exterior was streaked with decades of grime. The fences were choked with dead weeds, and the massive doors appeared rusted shut. Julian turned to me, his face pale in the dim light of the dashboard. He demanded to know why I had brought him to a condemned service entrance in the middle of the night. He asked what this could possibly have to do with his mother. I did not answer him immediately. I reached into my thick leather briefcase resting on the center console. I pulled out my tablet, the same device Chloe had so eagerly photographed just 3 days prior. I tapped the screen, unlocking the device, and bypassed my personal email applications. I opened the encrypted software linked to the security network of the vault. The screen flared to life, illuminating the dark cabin of the vehicle with a stark bluish glow. I divided the screen into a 4-panel grid. 2 panels displayed the high-definition infrared exterior feeds covering the front gates and the loading area. The other 2 panels showed the interior of the vault, revealing the pristine, brightly lit military-grade staging ground that Chloe was entirely unaware of. I turned to my son, looking deeply into his confused, frightened eyes. I told him that the woman he married was not a brand manager. I told him that her entire firm was a rented post office box and that she had lost her entire inheritance in a catastrophic financial gamble. I watched the blood drain completely from his face as I calmly explained that his wife was currently $2 million in debt to a violent loan shark syndicate. I did not soften the blow. I told him that Chloe had been systematically siphoning money from his architectural firm for the past 8 months, pushing his business toward a forced bankruptcy just to cover the minimum interest payments on her massive hidden debts. Julian opened his mouth to speak, to deny everything I was saying, to defend the woman he loved. But the words died in his throat. He could see the unwavering, absolute certainty in my eyes. He knew me well enough to understand that I would never manufacture a lie of this magnitude. I held the glowing tablet out toward him. My hand was perfectly steady. I told him that Chloe had broken into my private study. I told him she had found a fabricated inventory manifest detailing $20 million in untraceable diamonds stored inside the exact vault we were currently parked outside of. I explained that Chloe had sold that fake information to her criminal creditors, brokering a heist to save her own life and secure a one-way ticket out of the country. Julian stared at the screen, his breathing shallow and erratic. He looked back up at the reinforced exterior of the building across the street, his mind desperately trying to reconcile the decaying facade with the high-tech, heavily armed reality displayed on the tablet. I told him that the vault was not a storage space. I told him it was a highly classified federal data hub used to stage sensitive information. I told him it was wired with silent federal alarms, motion lasers, and guarded by a tactical team armed with military assault rifles. I gently pressed the tablet into his trembling hands. I told him to watch the screen closely. I told him that the mandatory dinner meeting Chloe claimed to be attending was actually a rendezvous with a violent robbery crew. I told him that within the next few minutes, he was going to watch his wife attempt to breach a federal stronghold. He was going to watch the illusion shatter. And he was going to finally see the true monster hiding behind the mask. I placed my hand gently over his, offering silent comfort as we waited for the absolute devastation to begin. The trap was finally set. The silence inside the heavy vehicle was suffocating, thick with an unspoken dread that pressed down on us. Julian sat frozen beside me in the passenger seat, his wide eyes locked onto the glowing screen of the silver tablet resting on the center console. He was holding his breath, silently praying to whatever God would listen, that I was just a crazy, paranoid old man making a terrible mistake. I could feel the terrifying tremors radiating from his hand, trapped tightly under mine. The sophisticated infrared cameras covering the desolate exterior of the vault displayed a haunting, stark landscape painted entirely in shades of gray and stark white. The heavily reinforced fence looked exactly like a solid wall of pale bones in the pristine digital feed. The agonizing minutes dragged by with a heavy leaden weight that made it incredibly difficult to breathe. Every single rhythmic tick of the digital dashboard clock felt like a brutal physical blow directly to my chest. I knew precisely how desperately my son wanted me to be wrong tonight. He wanted the charming woman he had married to be attending a late-night business dinner with wealthy international investors in a brightly lit upscale downtown restaurant. He desperately wanted his fragile dream to remain completely intact. But beautiful dreams built on a rotten foundation of calculated endless lies eventually collapse. And the inevitable collapse is never gentle or kind. I stared intently at the screen, my expression carved from solid stone, patiently waiting for the desperate rat to finally enter the concrete maze I had built. At exactly 12:14 in the morning, a pair of bright headlights suddenly swept across the cracked, uneven asphalt of the dark service road. Julian let out a sharp, involuntary gasp of pure terror, his trembling fingers digging painfully into the soft leather of the armrest. A dark, unmarked cargo van rolled to a remarkably slow menacing halt just outside the visible radius of the primary streetlights. The suspicious vehicle was parked exactly 50 yards away from the heavy perimeter gates of the silent vault. The metal side door of the van slid open with a harsh scrape, and three distinct figures immediately emerged into the stark infrared glare of my hidden security network. They moved together with a highly predatory, synchronized, and chilling efficiency. Two of the men were massive, incredibly broad-shouldered thugs, dressed head to toe in dark tactical combat gear. They casually carried heavy, unmistakable assault rifles slung menacingly across their broad chests. The third figure was noticeably smaller, wearing a sleek, tailored dark designer suit that looked entirely absurdly out of place in the desolate, ruined environment. It was Chloe. She was confidently holding a massive, heavy industrial drill gripped tightly in her hands. Julian physically recoiled in his passenger seat, pressing his back hard against the door, as strangled, agonizing, and broken sob violently ripped from his dry throat as he stared blankly at the high-definition video feed. There was absolutely no mistaken identity occurring here. There was no plausible, charming excuse left for her to utilize. The woman he truly loved, the woman who had solemnly promised to protect and cherish him forever, was standing in a deserted, filthy alleyway with dangerous armed mercenaries actively preparing to illegally break into a highly classified federal hub. I reached out and tapped the audio icon located on the bottom corner of the tablet screen. I patched the sophisticated parabolic security microphones from the exterior cameras directly into the surround sound speakers of my parked vehicle. A low hissing burst of electrical static briefly filled the dark cabin, quickly replaced by the crisp, terrifyingly clear audio transmitting from the deserted street outside. We could distinctly hear the heavy, aggressive crunch of loose gravel grinding beneath their thick combat boots. We could clearly hear the rhythmic, metallic clinking of their heavy tactical gear shifting in the cold night air. And then we finally heard Chloe's voice completely stripped of its usual charming, highly polished and manipulative cadence. She sounded incredibly frantic, overwhelmingly greedy, and utterly terrifyingly ruthless. "We are going to quickly drill the main steel lock on the front perimeter gate," Chloe instructed the armed men, gesturing wildly toward the rusted, imposing entrance. "The old man is a complete, utter fool. He relies entirely on heavy steel padlocks and outdated deadbolts to protect his massive fortune. There are absolutely no exterior surveillance cameras and no electronic security measures installed anywhere on this outer boundary. Once we are safely inside the main concrete yard, I have the exact numerical combination required to open the secondary reinforced door." The massive loan shark towering ominously next to her let out a low, deeply menacing grunt, casually adjusting the heavy tactical rifle strapped securely across his chest. "We really better not be walking blindly into a stupid setup." "Chloe," the dangerous thug growled, his rough voice a low, threatening and violent rumble that vibrated intensely through the interior speakers of my car. "If this massive building is actually empty, you are definitely not walking back out of this dark alleyway alive tonight." Chloe scoffed loudly, letting out a cold, highly arrogant sound that made my devastated son physically flinch in his seat. "It is definitely not empty," Chloe replied confidently. her rising tone dripping with sheer, unadulterated, and sickening greed. I saw the actual highly confidential inventory manifest with my own 2 eyes. The diamonds are stacked right inside the primary holding bay. We will quickly load the heavy cases directly into the back of the cargo van, and we will disappear completely before sunrise. The second armed thug stepped forward aggressively, resting a massive gloved hand heavily on the rusted fence. "And what exactly about your husband?" he asked casually, turning his head to look at Chloe. "Are you absolutely sure he is not going to immediately file a missing persons report with the local police when you do not come home tonight? A massive police investigation is going to bring intense heat we really do not need right now." Chloe did not even hesitate for a single fraction of a second. The ultimate betrayal flowed freely from her mouth with an effortless, breathtaking, and monstrous cruelty. "Once we grab the diamonds, I am out," Chloe stated firmly, her cold words echoing clearly through the dark cabin of my car. "Block Julian's number. He has absolutely no idea what is actually going on. Let the dumb fool rot with his bankrupt firm." The silence inside my vehicle was completely absolute, stunning, and profound. Julian stared blankly at the screen, his face completely drained of color. The perfect illusion he had fiercely protected shattered instantly into a million irreparable pieces. He let out a long, agonizing wail, collapsing forward helplessly, his shoulders trembling with violent, uncontrollable sobs. I immediately reached across the center console, wrapping my strong arms tightly around my devastated son. "I promised your mother I would never let anyone destroy your life and get away with it," I whispered very fiercely. We sat in the suffocating darkness of the heavy vehicle. Julian slowly pulled back from my chest. His tears had stopped, replaced by a cold, hollow numbness that settled deeply into his eyes. He wiped his face with the back of his trembling hand and turned his gaze back to the glowing screen of the silver tablet, and then to the dilapidated structure looming across the street. We watched in absolute silence as the 3 figures moved with calculated precision toward the primary entrance of the vault. Chloe walked with a false, arrogant swagger, completely convinced of her own manufactured brilliance. The 2 massive mercenaries flanked her, their heavy tactical boots crunching softly against the gravel. Chloe stopped at the main gate. The thick reinforced steel securing the rusted entrance looked formidable, but it was nothing more than a fragile illusion. She raised the heavy industrial drill. Locking the bit against the center mechanism, she leaned her entire body weight into the handle. A sharp metallic grinding echoed through the silent alleyway, perfectly captured by the sensitive parabolic microphones and broadcast directly into the cabin of my car. The severed lock fell heavily to the dirt. Chloe pushed the iron gate open. It protested with a long BN, agonizing screech of ungreased hinges. The armed thugs scanned the deserted perimeter, their assault rifles raised, completely unaware that multiple high-definition thermal cameras were currently tracking their every single heartbeat. They crossed the 50 yards of cracked, weed-choked concrete. Chloe led the way toward the massive reinforced door. This was the exact spot she believed held her ultimate salvation. She pulled her smartphone from her tailored blazer pocket. I knew exactly what she was looking at. She was reviewing the photographs she had stolen from my study, staring at the fabricated access codes I had specifically designed for her. She approached the rusted keypad mounted on the brick wall beside the door. She punched in the numerical sequence with eager, trembling fingers. A heavy hydraulic clunk reverberated from deep within the belly of the building. The massive steel door slowly began to open on its thick industrial tracks, grinding against the concrete. Chloe took a confident step forward, a victorious smile spreading across her face. She was fully expecting to walk into a dark, quiet room overflowing with untraceable industrial diamonds. She expected to find her freedom. She stepped across the threshold, her expensive designer shoes crossing the invisible plane of the motion lasers. The response was absolutely instantaneous and completely devastating. The trap did not just spring, it violently exploded. Before Chloe could even take a second step, massive banks of military-grade floodlights ignited simultaneously across the entire perimeter of the yard. The sudden, intense brilliance turned the pitch-black night into an artificial black, blinding daylight. The light was so fierce and aggressive that Julian and I had to physically shield our eyes. A split second later, the deafening, bone-rattling wail of a federal emergency siren erupted from the rooftop of the building. The sound was a physical force aimed at T-Mine. A terrifying rhythmic shriek designed to disorient and paralyze. On the security screen, Chloe froze. Her victorious smile vanished instantly, replaced by a mask of sheer, unadulterated panic. She dropped her drill to the concrete, raising her arms to shield her eyes from the blinding glare. The two hardened mercenaries behind her instinctively raised their assault rifles, their tactical training kicking in as they desperately searched for targets in the chaotic light. But their criminal experience also allowed them to immediately recognize the terrifying reality of their situation. This was not a poorly guarded storage space. They had walked blindly into a highly fortified federal stronghold. Heavy steel tactical doors swung open on all sides of the yard. Dozens of highly trained, heavily armored federal guards poured out into the glaring light. They moved with terrifying speed and absolute military precision, forming a tight, inescapable perimeter around the three intruders. They did not carry standard sidearms. They carried high-powered, short-barreled assault rifles, and every single weapon was raised and locked firmly onto their targets. A booming, amplified voice echoed through a heavy loudspeaker, cutting cleanly through the wailing siren. Federal Data Hub. Drop your weapons immediately or you will be shot. Do it now. The mercenaries were violent men, but they were not suicidal. They instantly realized they were vastly outgunned and hopelessly outmaneuvered by federal authorities. Without a single moment of hesitation, they dropped their heavy rifles. They let their weapons fall onto the concrete, interlaced their fingers behind their heads, and slowly dropped to their knees. They knew the penalty for threatening a federal guard was a guaranteed death sentence. Chloe, however, completely unraveled. The polished, manipulative influencer simply ceased to exist. The woman who had callously planned to abandon her husband to violent loan sharks was instantly reduced to a pathetic, terrified shell. She dropped her phone, the device clattering loudly against the pavement. She did not simply kneel. Her legs gave out completely. She collapsed onto the cold, hard ground, falling directly into a shallow puddle of muddy water. Dozens of glowing red laser sights instantly tracked across her chest, dancing wildly over the lapels of her expensive tailored blazer. She threw her hands into the air, her body shaking with violent tremors. She began to cry. It was not a quiet, dignified surrender. It was a loud, hysterical, and embarrassing wail of absolute terror. Through the high-definition audio feed, Julian and I could hear her frantically begging for her life, screaming that it was all a terrible mistake, that she was just a businesswoman looking for her father-in-law. The federal guards ignored her pathetic pleas. 4 heavily armored officers moved in rapidly, kicking Chloe flat onto her stomach in the mud. They wrenched her arms violently behind her back, securing her wrists with heavy steel handcuffs. I watched the dark spreading stain forming on the front of her tailored trousers. In the face of actual immediate consequence, Chloe Sterling had lost complete control of her bodily functions. She had literally wet herself in the mud, crying like a frightened child. While federal agents stripped her of her freedom, I turned slightly to look at my son. Julian was staring intently at the tablet screen, completely mesmerized by the pathetic, humiliating spectacle unfolding on the concrete. There was no pity left in his eyes. There was no lingering trace of love or affection for the woman begging in the mud. The calculated illusion she had so carefully maintained for 3 years was permanently, irreparably shattered. He was finally seeing the miserable, cowardly reality of the woman who had promised to cherish him forever. Julian slowly reached over and closed the protective cover of the tablet. Shutting off the video feed, he let out a long, heavy breath, releasing the immense burden he had been unknowingly carrying for years. He looked at me, his face illuminated by the distant glow of the floodlights. His eyes were now completely clear. The morning sun cast a long, pale golden light across the polished granite countertops of my kitchen. The house was profoundly quiet, a stark contrast to the chaotic, terrifying symphony of federal sirens and screaming mercenaries that had dominated the previous night. I stood by the coffee maker, listening to the rhythmic, comforting drip of the dark liquid filling the glass carafe. Julian sat silently at the kitchen island, his hands wrapped tightly around a warm ceramic mug. He was pale and visibly exhausted, but the agonizing tension that had gripped his shoulders for 2 long years was completely gone. The devastating illusion of his perfect marriage had been brutally ripped away, leaving behind a profound sense of clarity. We had not spoken much since returning from the industrial district. There was no need for grand speeches or emotional declarations. He had witnessed the absolute truth with his own 2 eyes. And that truth had irrevocably severed the toxic chains Chloe had wrapped around his life. I poured myself a cup of black coffee, savoring the bitter, earthy aroma, and turned to face my son. I was just about to ask him what he wanted for breakfast when his mobile phone shattered the peaceful silence. The device vibrated aggressively against the solid granite, the harsh electronic ringtone echoing sharply in the quiet kitchen. Julian flinched slightly, his eyes darting to the glowing screen. He stared at the unknown out-of-state number flashing relentlessly. A sudden, deep apprehension clouded his features. He slowly reached out and pressed the green button, sliding his thumb across the glass to answer the call. He placed the phone on speaker, laying it flat on the counter between us. A cold, automated, and entirely emotionless voice filled the room. "This is a collect call from the county correctional facility. An inmate has requested to speak with you. If you wish to accept the charges, press 1 now." Julian looked up at me, his eyes wide and searching. I gave him a single firm nod. He pressed the number 1 on his keypad. The automated voice clicked off immediately, replaced by the frantic echoing sounds of a crowded holding block. And then we heard Chloe. "Julian, please tell me you are there." Her voice was a high-end pronoun, pathetic, and agonizingly desperate whine. She was sobbing uncontrollably, her words tripping over each other in a rushed, terrified frenzy. "You have to listen to me. There has been a massive, terrible misunderstanding. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I was just driving past your father's old vault, and these armed men jumped out of nowhere. The police arrested me by mistake. They have me locked in a cell with violent criminals. Julian, it is terrifying in here. You have to call my lawyer right now. You have to drain the business accounts and post my bail immediately. They are talking about federal charges, but it is all a complete lie. You have to get me out of here today." I listened to the pathetic, sniveling coward pouring her fabricated lies through the speaker. Even now, trapped behind solid steel bars and facing decades of incarceration, she was still attempting to manipulate her husband. She was still desperately trying to use him as a convenient shield to escape the devastating consequences of her own boundless greed. She had spent the previous night casually plotting to hand him over to ruthless loan sharks, and now she was begging him to empty his struggling firm's accounts to purchase her freedom. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of her narcissism was almost breathtaking. I watched Julian carefully. A single tear rolled down his cheek, but his expression did not soften with pity. His face hardened into a mask of pure, undeniable revulsion. He opened his mouth to reply, to unleash the righteous fury he had every right to express. But I gently placed my hand over his. I shook my head slowly. This was not his burden to carry anymore. The final execution belonged entirely to me. I picked up the phone from the granite counter, lifting it to my ear. I took a slow, deep breath, letting the cold, unwavering resolve settle completely into my voice. "Hello, Chloe," I said, my tone as flat and unforgiving as a slab of solid concrete. The frantic, pathetic sobbing on the other end of the line ceased instantly. The silence that followed was so profound. I could practically hear her racing heartbeat through the digital connection. When she finally spoke, her voice was nothing more than a terrified, trembling whisper. "Arthur," she breathed, the realization striking her with the force of a physical blow. "Where is Julian? Why do you have his phone?" "I want to speak to my husband immediately. Julian is sitting right beside me," I replied calmly, taking a slow sip of my hot coffee. "And he has absolutely nothing to say to you. He is completely finished listening to your endless pathetic lies. We had a very illuminating evening together. Chloe, we took a lovely scenic drive down to the service road. We parked in a dark alleyway across from a certain dilapidated building, and we watched a highly entertaining show unfold on my security feed. We watched you confidently attempt to break into a federal data hub, and we watched you cry like a terrified child when the tactical guards put you face down in the mud. There was a sharp, strangled intake of breath from the other side of the line. You were there." Chloe choked out, her voice thick with rising panic. "You set me up. You faked that entire inventory manifest. You deliberately led me straight into a trap. I did not set you up." "Chloe," I corrected smoothly, feeling a deep, satisfying warmth spread through my chest. "I simply presented you with a beautifully crafted mirror, and you eagerly showed me the monstrous reflection of your own bottomless greed. You wanted to steal my legacy. You wanted to sacrifice my son to violent criminals just to secure your own cowardly escape. You wanted my vault. Chloe, you got it. But you did not break into a clueless old man's abandoned storage space. You did not find $20 million in unregistered diamonds waiting to be stolen. You broke directly into a highly classified federal staging facility. You coordinated an armed assault on a United States government stronghold. The men you brought with you were carrying illegal assault rifles. You triggered a level 4 federal response. Arthur, please." Chloe Bagel, her voice completely shattering into high, hysterical sobs. "You have to tell them the absolute truth. You have to help me now." I laughed a low, cold sound, holding absolutely no trace of humor. "I am not going to help you, Chloe," I stated firmly. "Enjoy your 25-year federal sentence without parole. You are a ghost to us." Chloe screamed in absolute despair. I pressed the red button. cutting her off completely, and permanently blocked the number. The bright morning sun was shining perfectly. The nightmare was truly over, and our family was finally safe and completely free. Exactly 1 entire month after that unforgettable night, the oppressive clouds that had choked our family finally parted. Chloe was sitting in a cold isolation cell inside a maximum security federal detention center, awaiting a highly publicized federal trial. The ruthless syndicate loan sharks she had brazenly attempted to double-cross were indicted right alongside her. A federal judge had taken one look at the overwhelming mountain of evidence and immediately denied Chloe any possibility of bail, officially declaring her an extreme flight risk. She was going absolutely nowhere. She would eventually trade her tailored designer blazers for a bright orange jumpsuit, and the woman who once believed she was untouchable would soon become nothing more than a forgotten prisoner serving a devastating sentence. On a remarkably beautiful Thursday morning, I drove my son into the bustling heart of the city. Julian sat comfortably in the passenger seat of my car. His complexion was completely restored. His posture radiated a quiet, undeniable strength. The divorce proceedings were already moving forward with an incredible swiftness, surgically excising Chloe from his life permanently. We parked outside a towering glass structure and rode a silent elevator directly to the prestigious top floor. Nathaniel Reed, my most trusted corporate attorney and a fierce loyalist to my family. I was waiting patiently for us inside his expansive corner office. Julian took a seat in a plush leather armchair, casting a curious, questioning glance in my direction. I walked slowly across the expensive carpet and sat directly beside him. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. I opened it and placed a single heavy brass key squarely onto the polished mahogany desk between us. Julian stared at the ornate key, completely bewildered. He asked what it was for, his voice echoing softly in the quiet room. I smiled warmly, reaching out to gently cover his hand with mine. I told him that a man who spends his entire life building a massive empire from concrete and steel learns to hide his most precious treasures where absolutely no one will ever look. I explained that Chloe had foolishly believed my wealth was locked away inside a rusted vault or sitting exposed in vulnerable personal bank accounts. But Chloe was a remarkably superficial creature who never understood the profound depths of a father's protective instincts. I nodded toward Nathaniel, who handed Julian a thick, leather-bound portfolio. I told him to open it. His trembling fingers turned the crisp, heavy pages. He stared at the complex legal documents, struggling to process the massive figures printed in bold black ink. I explained that years ago, shortly before his mother passed away, we had quietly established an impenetrable blind trust exclusively in his name. The real wealth, the massive culmination of my life's hardest work, was completely legally insulated. It was protected by layers of ironclad corporate law and entirely untouchable by any greedy, manipulative spouses. The brass key unlocked a private vault containing the physical bearer bonds and certified asset deeds that belonged solely to him. Chloe had spent 2 years hunting for a hidden fortune that she literally never had the legal clearance to touch. Tears of profound, overwhelming gratitude spilled freely down Julian's cheeks. He stood up abruptly, wrapping his arms tightly around my neck, burying his face into my shoulder. I held him close, feeling the incredible, undeniable bond between a father and his beloved son restored completely. He thanked me endlessly, but I told him that protecting him was the greatest privilege of my entire life. Later that week, Julian officially reopened his architectural firm. With the heavy, suffocating anchor of Chloe's secret financial drain permanently removed, the business began to flourish immediately. He hired 2 new assistants to manage the overflowing client orders, and his vibrant, joyous laughter echoed through the fragrant, bright office once again. He was finally reclaiming his independence. That Sunday evening, I sat alone on the sturdy wooden porch of my quiet house. The late afternoon sun hung low on the distant horizon, casting a warm, brilliant golden glow across the manicured green lawn. I held a crystal glass filled with rich amber scotch. The air was incredibly peaceful, devoid of the chaotic tension that had previously poisoned our lives. I took a slow sip of the smooth, burning liquid, letting the comforting warmth spread deep into my chest. I looked up at the vast, beautiful expanse of the painted sky, feeling a profound presence settling softly over me. I smiled, raising my glass in a silent solemn toast. I kept my promise. Eleanor, I whispered to the gentle wind, my voice thick with unshakable conviction. Nobody takes what is ours. Greed is a blinding poison, making arrogant people believe they are smarter than everyone else. When you exploit the pure love of a family to line your pockets, you inevitably build your own inescapable cage. True wealth is not found in secret vaults, stolen accounts, or fabricated lies. It is forged through decades of honest sweat, fierce loyalty, and the unwavering instinct of a father defending his own wavering. Never underestimate a quiet man who spent his entire life building a massive empire from raw materials. He knows exactly how to dispose of the trash that threatens his beautiful, beloved family.